Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 56 of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. I apologize for the later episode this week. Long story short, of course, here in Lexington, kind of right before the ice started to clear up, right before everything started to, start to look good again, I slipped on the ice, landed right on my butt, busted myself pretty good. It was so bad that I couldn't even bear to, sit up in this chair. Back still isn't 100%. I currently have, a pillow going on back there. Got some ibuprofen in my system. Powering through it, but I wanted to get on here and talk because we are finally coming off a win. Feels so good to say that. We got so used to Kentucky winning. Almost feel like I took it for granted, and now Cats are back in the win column. So let's get this show started without any further ado. So, number one, of course, we got to talk about the rankings and polls and whatnot. And right now, Kentucky is the number 18 team in the country, according to the AP poll. Hard to argue with, right? They were sitting at 16, fell back down to 18. That's just what happens when you lose games. And I hate it because, that immediately followed a loss to Vanderbilt. And it's unfortunate because Kentucky lost to that Vanderbilt team by 1 point, 84-83, and that same Vandy team just beat Texas by 16, right? And I just sit and wonder to myself, do we have to continually drop teams in the polls when they lose to teams like that in that kind of way, for Kentucky? But regardless, Cats back down to number 18. Kentucky is currently sitting at number 17 in the net rankings. Kentucky plays Ole Miss, who, of course, we will talk about on Sunday. The Rebels are number 18. So 17 and 18 there playing against each other. Again, hard to be mad at the net. The net, at least with the AP poll, it's people sitting around and voting on the net. It's kind of just a numbers and metrics thing. Moving on to quad records. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the quad records is what the NCAA selections show tournament. The committee. This is what they'll look at. So already we see how Kentucky has really started to slide when it comes to quad one games. Right? Kentucky's lost to Maryland, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi State, Vandy, and Texas. As far as the quad one games, though. And then Kentucky's quad one wins are currently Louisville, LSU, and Oklahoma. Those are three really good wins. Of course, Louisville and LSU being on the road. You got to really, you like the fact that almost all of your losses are quad one. Of course, you look down there in quad two. Kentucky did lose to Georgia at home. So you would hope maybe by the end of the year that could sneak up into a quad one game. I just don't think it'll happen. I think Kentucky is going to have a quad two loss. And to be quite frank with you, I think if Kentucky is going to host in the NCAA tournament, if they're going to lose, it's going to have to be Vandy and South Carolina. They can't lose. I know Ole Miss is a quad one game. I think you have to win that one if you want to host. And Kentucky definitely can't drop a game against Auburn, for example, coming up. So, hope Kentucky does well there. But at the end of the day, you look at the quad records, 3-6 in quad one, 2-1 in quad two, and a combined 14-0 in quad 3 and 4. Not really too much of a surprise there. Kentucky is currently slated as a 5 seed in the latest ESPN bracketology. Had one come out this morning. Now, I want to look at the bracket because I, for one, would not be mad at this bracket at all, right? Of course, Kentucky being a 5 seed, that means they don't get to host the first 2 rounds, and that sucks, don't get me wrong. But when you sit there and you look at, Kentucky's path to a Sweet 16, a path to an Elite 8, you kind of start to feel like, okay, maybe there's some winnable games here, right? The first round matchup right now, as it is currently projected, would be against the winner of, looks like, Clemson and Arizona State. Now, Arizona State started the year off fiery hot. I think they started the year off, it was like 16-0, 17-0, something like that. They've dropped some, obviously, in Big 12 play. And then, the 4 seed who you would, presumably meet in the second round is Maryland, who I know Kentucky lost to that Maryland team in November, but I would like to think Kentucky, has gotten a little bit better since that game. I know there's been some losses mixed in there, obviously, but I'd like to think Kentucky's gotten a little bit better. But then Maryland, they're so banged up, they're so hurt, they're not the same team they were back then, right? And I still think Maryland's a really good team, and that's obviously going to be a tough game. I mean, Maryland on the road is never going to be an easy game, but you look at some of the other teams you could be playing, I feel a lot better about that game than I would say TCU on the road, or, maybe an Ole Miss on the road or Oklahoma on the road, right? I kind of feel good about that Maryland game on the road. And then, of course, when you get to the Sweet 16, you're probably playing South Carolina, and, we'd have to see what happens there, obviously. But, as far as getting out of the first weekend, I feel pretty good about where Kentucky is in the current projections, even though they are a bit down in the rankings just a little bit. Shout out to Matt G in the chat. Always appreciate your support, Matt, saying, okay, from this moment on, we are going undefeated. And I like that attitude. And that's exactly what I want to hear as we head into what is really a super, super pivotal stretch heading into the final legs of not only the regular season, but then, of course, getting ready for SEC tournament and then March Madness. Now, the Texas A&M game, that's what I want to talk about. Of course, with the later podcast this week, I did want to recap Vandy and Texas, but look, I think if you want me to give you a quick recap of both of those games before I dive into Texas A&M, I will say, well, number one, the Vandy game, look, you're right there. Turnovers killed you. Don't let Michaela Blake score 37. Okay. And then for Texas, when I think about that Texas game, Kentucky was right there, right? I think they were down, it was 49-48 with 6 minutes to go. And Texas just pulled away. And it's crazy to see that Texas team just got blown out at Vanderbilt. First of all, Vandy's insanely good. And there might be a segment come later in the season where I'm sitting there saying to myself, okay, maybe I'm an idiot for clowning on Vandy as much as I did in the preseason. But they're really good. I mean, Aubrey Galvin, man, I think I talked about her when we were previewing that Vanderbilt game, but she is legitimately, there's people right now talking about her for National Freshman of the Year. I don't know about all that. I think Michaela Blakes has a case for National Player of the Year. I think Shea Ralph should win Coach of the Year. But as far as Aubrey Galvin winning Freshman of the Year, I don't know about that. Aaliyah Chavez, of course, at Oklahoma, Jazzy Davidson at USC. I still like them a bit more than Galvin, but she's playing tremendously well. And, with her being a freshman and then Blake's currently a sophomore, that's going to be a tandem to come for the next couple of years. Going to be one of the most scary backcourts, not only in the SEC, but the country. But, that team just blew out Texas, but that's still a good Texas team. And I thought it was crazy how Vic Schaefer, after that game, was talking about how that Texas team has no heart. He called his team soft, right? Which I'm personally not a fan of, right, as a coach. I know me, if I'm a player and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I want, what is my coach saying? If he's calling me soft and saying I have no heart, I don't really love that. And I'm all a fan of hard coaching, and I actually really like Vic Schaefer a whole lot. Maybe it's biased, but I would say Kenny's my favorite SEC coach, but Vic Schaefer's right there. And honestly, I really like Shea Ralph too. There's a lot of good coaches in the SEC. Christy Curry at Alabama is another one I really like personally. I just love the way they act, like their demeanor for the most part, the way they coach. But lately, man, Vic Schaefer, it's been angry, grumpy grandpa, right, of the SEC. But Texas is a great team, even if Vic Schaefer doesn't think they are right now. And I don't, LSU, Kentucky lost by 11 at Texas. LSU lost by 13. And I said something after the Texas game, man, Kentucky's playing like a top 10 team. It's just not working right now. And some people kind of rebutted that, and I kind of get that. It's hard to say that coming off losses, but at the same time, LSU, like, I think we'd say they're a top 10 team, and they lost a little bit worse than we did down there. So, got Diz Fan in the chat saying, did I see Kim Caldwell's comments after Tennessee's loss to South Carolina? Yes, I did, and oh my goodness. For those of you who don't know, of course, Kim Caldwell, the head coach down there at Tennessee now, takes over, the second greatest program in the history of the sport behind Geno's UConn team, right? Long story short, I believe, I can't remember the final score. I want to say it was 93-50. South Carolina beat Tennessee. Worst loss in the history of Tennessee women's basketball. And after their game, Kim Caldwell, kind of like Vic Schaefer, was calling out her team, saying, "Well, these girls are going to quit on you." I don't know if she said the no heart, anything like that, but I do remember specifically Kim Caldwell was saying, this is not acceptable. But the main thing was our girls, like, they quit. And again, like, actually, I don't really love the way Kim coaches, right? I think she's a great person. I don't have any reason not to think that. I don't know about her, like, the way she does, like, the subbing and all. Like, I don't know about that. But, I mean, listen, she's a young coach. I actually saw where you were talking about Kim Caldwell's comments. I saw where Dawn Staley kind of after that, it was so bad where she kind of, in her own press conference, Dawn Staley was trying to give advice to Kim Caldwell and was like, hey, maybe don't say that publicly, but it's, there's a different standard down there at Tennessee, and I get that, and Kim Caldwell's trying to live up to it. But, as far as her and Vic, they just said some things recently that I don't know if I'd say those things. And that's where I give Kenny some credit because, I don't know, maybe sometimes he does think, well, I'll tell you, he doesn't think his team's soft. We learned that last night. He was very adamant about we are not soft, right? He said that in his post-game press conference after Texas A&M. But, maybe there are times where he's like, man, I wish we had a bit more fight or whatever. But he doesn't trash his players. He'll never do that. He'll never throw his kids under the bus. So I think that is a very respectable, redeemable quality about Kenny because, I think we as media, as fans, we sit here and we're talking about how it's so cliche for coaches to say, put it on me, don't put it on these kids, right? We heard John Calipari say that for years. But at the same time, like, I think there is truth to that, and you don't want to see coaches just throw their kids under the bus. But more on Texas A&M, 75-55 win for Kentucky. First of all, I think one of my main takeaways from the game, which I think is just about everybody's main takeaway from the game, congratulations, a round of applause for Toni Morgan, who set the Kentucky single-season assist record. She is now up to 219. And you may be wondering, well, Phoenix, whose record did she break last night? And believe it or not, Georgia Amore, who last season had 213 assists in 31 games. Toni Morgan now up to 219 through just 26 games, so 5 less games there for her. But, that's an incredible feat, obviously, to do it in that kind of speed, right, that amount of time. And it's crazy because I think literally between Patty Jo Hedges, right, who has been the point guard queen of this university for 40 years, and then the last 2 point guards you've had in Georgia Amore and Toni Morgan, like, those are your 3 best point guards in program history, I would dare to say without thinking too hard about it. Like, and they're certainly your 3 best passers, right, from the point guard spot. So, again, congrats to Toni. Other big takeaway from the game. Kentucky trot out a new starting lineup. Now, I don't want to pretend I do. Actually, you know what? I do. I want to pretend like I'm a genius here. Okay? So after the Texas game, I wrote a takeaways article. You can find it at KentuckySportsRadio.com where I proposed a lineup tweak. And I promise you all, did not have any inside information that this was coming, anything like that. Again, we're just going to pretend I'm a genius, okay? And my proposal was well, let's start Asia Boone at the 2, and let's see what Jordan Obi can do off the bench, right? And for me, I don't think Jordan Obi sucks. I've never thought that. But she has had a rough stretch, right? Before the A&M game, she had 7 total points in her last 3 games. And then you look at Asia Boone, who had scored in double figures in 5 consecutive games and scored 16 points, I believe it was, against Texas. So, to me, it just kind of made sense where you could see, maybe it's time to make this switch. For one, I think, first of all, Asia Boone was already playing more minutes per game than Jordan Obi, so it's not like you were drastically changing the rotation anyway. But to me, I wanted to see, okay, could Kentucky get off to faster starts, right? Like, could Kentucky get out to maybe a bigger lead to start the game? And then I also wanted to see, could Jordan Obi benefit from taking a seat on the bench to start the game, kind of getting a feel for the game, and then checking in and seeing, how she produces. And I think against Texas A&M, when we saw that lineup change, I think we got, the best of both worlds out of, that situation, right? You look at Asia Boone, she has one of her best games as a Kentucky Wildcat, tied for a team-high 19 points, 4 of 9 shooting from 3 assists, 2 rebounds. And Jordan Obi, didn't have the game of her life or anything like that, but it was her best game, since that, nasty stretch began. 8 points and then 8 rebounds for her. So, and then when you look at the minutes distribution there, Asia Boone played 33 minutes and Jordan Obi played 25. And what I thought was interesting, and I didn't think about this part, and again, this is why Kenny's the coach, I'm not, and I freely grant that. I would have thought, okay, you bring Jordan Obi off the bench, then you can put her at the 2 or whatever. I actually thought it was a really good idea for Kenny to bring her in and put her at the 4, right? He brought her in for Claire Strack, and then I believe they just slid Tiani Key maybe down to the 5. I can't remember exactly who all was in at that point. But Jordan Obi played the 4 when she got in, and it's like, oh, that's her more natural position. And she looks pretty good. Kentucky Rick in the chat saying that Jordan Obi was fine until she had to cover for Key's injury. That messed her up, I think. She just hasn't found her way back from that change. And I think she kind of did start to find her way back against A&M, but I think you're absolutely right where, everybody was thrown off balance with that Tiani Key injury. Like, everybody was not their usual self. Claire Strack was trying to be Superwoman, right? I think Toni Morgan was even kind of in a little bit of a funk to a degree. But, with that Texas A&M game, I think we did kind of start to see Kentucky, like you saw it against Arkansas too. I think the whole stretch since Tiani Key's been back, I know you're only 2-2, but I think, really just about everybody's kind of started to figure out. And for Jordan Obi, I think it's taken a little bit longer for her to get back to normal, but I think last night was the good start to that. Got another point here in the chat noting that you got to play more physical than the other team. If someone is playing better, you got to wear them down, the screens and body contact running the court, play physical. And let me tell you, we got plenty of that against Texas A&M. So, in case you all didn't know, right? And I'm sure you all do know, but just in case you didn't for some odd reason, right? We got 40 minutes here in this game of women's college basketball, right? Same as the men's. I know it's divided into the quarters, same amount of time, 40 minutes. You know how many foul calls were in the game in general between both teams? 44. It is egregious. It is disgusting. Like, I don't even know if the Oklahoma game did that this year, where there were more fouls called in the game than there were minutes played in the game. That is absolutely ridiculous. And listen, I'm sitting there talking with fellow media people. Matt's already telling me don't start doing math on here. I'm not great at it, so that's about the farthest math I'll do. But, I'm sitting there talking to other media folks next to me, and we're all like, dude, this third quarter is taking, go ahead, start putting together your Christmas list because we're going to be here that long. It was absolutely absurd. The fourth quarter dragged out as well. And, Kentucky got out to that 27-5 lead at the end of the first quarter, and they coasted to the win. And, normally you'd want to see them, win by 40 and build on that early lead. And I think that alone kind of made it feel like the game was dragging a little bit. But the foul calls, look, Kenny said it, I think it was after Texas, because he was talking about Vic Schaefer's defense. And then, of course, we're going to see it on Sunday, too, against Ole Miss and Coach Yo's defense. Like, the way this game is officiated, the way, the rules are, I don't blame Vic or Coach Yo or whoever for playing this or Joni Taylor at A&M. I don't blame them for that kind of defense, but at the same time, it's like, dude, we're trying to grow the game here. We're trying to make this an entertaining product. And, again, I'm about to fall asleep over here trying to watch this game, and it's brutal. But, Kenny talked about it, and this is what I was saying when I mentioned Kenny saying his team's not soft. We think about Kentucky being different from everybody else in the SEC because, Kentucky's more about length. They try to be more athletic, but I'm not sure they actually have that level of athleticism this year. But they at least want to be longer, right? More so than physical. But they can be physical. They kind of have to be in these games. Kentucky out-rebounded Texas, and then they out-rebounded Texas A&M 52-32. So Kentucky can be physical. I'm actually curious to see how Kentucky does against Ole Miss on the boards. Excuse me. I don't remember what the exact numbers were last year, but I do know Ole Miss did dominate Kentucky on the board. So I'm curious to see how they adjust to that. But, as Matt says again, I think the officiating hurts the women's game more than the men's when it's bad. And I've said this in a on the message board, but I feel like women's referees, man, Doug Shows looks like Jesus Christ out there on the floor compared to most women's referees. So, that's just you never the women's game again. I think most of it goes to the rules, but it's not. I would say generally the women's product is fun to watch, but when you get 44 fouls in 40 minutes, it can be a bit of a crap show. Clara Strack had 17 points. Not her most efficient night, but again, she was getting clobbered all night long. Just 8 of 21 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3. 13 rebounds, 2 assists. She did have 3 blocks, though, so we do love to see that from her. And outside of that, not really a ton much. Lexi Blue got 8 minutes of playing time. Josie Gilvin, she did check in. Lexi Blue had 14 minutes, and Kaylin Carroll had 8 minutes. And so that was, I guess, interesting to see there as well. As this fan notes, we got to work on free throws. And then he says we got to work on free throws. Can you imagine if we held our free throws during the Vanderbilt game? I mean, yeah, there's a couple games this season where if you hit free throws, maybe it's a little bit different, right? Of course, if you hit free throws against Vandy, you win the basketball game, right? That's another elite marquee win you have. So I don't know. It's hard to obviously you got to work on free throws, but I don't know, man. I feel like with this team, it's kind of it is what it is. They're not a great free throw shooting team. Against Texas A&M, they went 16 of 25, shot 64%. I think this team is just going to shoot between 60 and 70% from the line, which really isn't all that great. Want to give a quick shout real quick to our friends over at Rollback. With Rollback, you can change the game. Rollback is a proud partner of KSR. Get the best fit and the best feel with their incredibly comfortable activewear. From polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta performance pants, you will look good and feel good with Rollback. Use promo code KSR for 20% off your first purchase at rollback.com. So now that we've talked through Texas A&M and how Kentucky got that win, much needed bounce back win, by the way. Got to talk about the next opportunity, right? Because Kentucky hosts Ole Miss on Sunday, the number 14 team in the country. Ole Miss is currently 20-5 on the season, 7-3 in the SEC. when you look at the SEC standings, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are 6th in the SEC standings, but looking to potentially make a push to what's the words here to get the double bye in the SEC tournament with Texas's loss. That definitely helps them out a little bit, but they've won 4 of their last 5, and Vandy is only they're 24-2 on the season, but one of their losses is to Ole Miss. Right, they had a really weird thing with the winter weather. That game got moved around. It was a really odd situation. Ole Miss stole that one and beat Vanderbilt. So, you'll see this when I go through the key players here in like 2 moments. But Ole Miss, I thought they won the transfer portal this offseason. When I looked at, I thought South Carolina getting Tania Latson, I was like, that's huge, and I think it's been good, but when I looked across the country, TCU and Ole Miss were the 2 teams that I said, okay, those 2 teams just won the transfer portal with who they got. Right, of course, TCU, they got Olivia Miles. There's going to be some names that I'm forgetting. Maddie Shear, technically, because she didn't even play last season for them, so they've got 2 former Cats in Maddie Shear and Clara Silva. Clara Silva doing good for them, by the way, last I checked. And then you go look at Ole Miss, and they're led by, a number of transfers, including forward Cody McMahon, Ohio State transfer, who, from what I remember, I think Kentucky actually checked in on during the transfer portal. Of course, went other ways. 19.9 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, and 2.8 assists per game. You got Christine Uwala, 13.5 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, and 1.3 assists per game. And then another transfer, Latasha Lattimore from Virginia, I believe. Yep, that is right. Yep, 10.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 2.1 blocks per game. And then Sierra Thino, 9.5 points, 5.9 rebounds, and then 2.4 assists per game. This Ole Miss team, it's like I said earlier, you think about how ugly the Texas game was, this game is going to be just as ugly. There's going to be a lot of fouling. There's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see another little scuffle kind of break out between these 2 teams. If you remember this game last year, Kentucky went on the road and lost. And what was really, again, another ugly kind of game, right? It was like, I'm going to say 67-58, and, I think we get something similar here. When I look and I know in the SEC standings, Ole Miss is a good chunk number above Kentucky in the standings, but I actually think Ole Miss and Kentucky are pretty comparable. Like, I think they are pretty similar in terms of talent level. I would even go as far as say pretty similar as far as like how good the coaches are. Matt G says at least there is no Reagan Beers on their team. That is very true. They do not have a Reagan Beers. This Ole Miss team, they're talented, and they, again, they're a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament projections. The ESPN bracketology were a 5. To me, I think if Kentucky can win this one, if Kentucky can beat Ole Miss, there is a potential that they could flip-flop. And obviously, if they flip in the bracketology, that means Kentucky would be hosting, Ole Miss would not. I don't know, though, because Kentucky has some extra losses compared to Ole Miss. But to end the season, I think Kentucky could be in a good position, certainly with a win against Ole Miss. I would even go as far as to say, I think I may even said it earlier in this show, I think this is pretty much a must-win if you want to host. It's not a must-win for, double bye in the SEC is out of the equation. But, I think you're holding on to the last glimmer of hope to hosting in the NCAA tournament. I think you have to win this one to be able to do that. And, I feel like I've been a bit of a Debbie Downer in the last several weeks when it comes to Kentucky women's basketball. Granted, they've been on a losing streak, but when I get to these game predictions, I'm so used to right now, feeling not great. I feel good about this Ole Miss game. I really do. Like I said, I feel like the talent levels are comparable. Coaching talent, coaching prestige level is about right there with each other with Kenny and Coach Yo. And to me, I think there is going to be one clear-cut edge to this game, and that's going to be that Kentucky's at home. And I'm expecting you all BBN to show up, be loud, empower Kentucky to a win. I've got the Cats winning 58-51. It kind of sucks because, well, not the win, but it kind of sucks because after this game, they have another bye, and I didn't totally realize that, but after this, they go on the road and play at Vandy next Sunday, not this coming Sunday, but the next Sunday. So, it'll be interesting to see, can Kentucky get a win against the Rebels, riding a 2-game winning streak now? Can you feel good about where you're at heading into a really big game at Vandy against a team that you feel like you can beat considering you only lost to them by 1? So, shout out to Billy McCoy saying, oops, that's Matt G again. Matt, I'll get to you in a second. Billy McCoy saying, I think you do an awesome job covering the Lady Cats. Give me the Cats 78-71. First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I hope this game gets up in the 70s. But I will say, W. Billy, man. I hope this game gets in the 70s, but with these defenses and neither team is great from shooting from 3, right? So I think this is gonna be an ugly one. But hopefully, I said 58-51. You say 78-71. I hope you're right because that's a more enjoyable game to watch. Now, what Matt was about to say. Quick 60-second preview of next year's roster. We're pretty far through the year now. Yeah, we are, and I can do a little quick 60-second preview. So, obviously, your core that you're bringing in, Madden Greenway, Savvy Swords, Emily McDonald, right, that is going to be huge. And I think Kaylin Carroll, she'll be a sophomore next season, obviously, but I think, she is going to be the 4th really key piece of that core. And I think that is a group that is going to stick together until they all graduate, right? I have no inside information regarding anything like this. Obviously, I'm expecting Clara Strack to come back for her senior year. Lexi Blue is one that, I don't want to speculate that she's gone, but I wouldn't be surprised if she left at this point. But she did stick it out through her freshman to sophomore year, so maybe she'll do the same sophomore to junior year. I would expect Asia Boone to be back. Here we go again. I keep forgetting what class she is. I think it'll be Asia's senior year next year. So you've got a good core. What you've got to hope is, first of all, you're still recruiting Sarah Okeke. Now, I don't know if Kentucky will get her, but fingers crossed you get her. But let's say you don't, right, because I don't know if they will. You got to try to find another backup 5, especially with Tiani Key and Amelia Hassett leaving. And right now, Kentucky doesn't have, any bigs coming in. You got to hope that you can go out and get somebody. Now, what sucks is that it is really hard. It's going to be longer than 60 seconds, but I'm sure you don't mind. But it is going to be really hard for Kentucky and Kenny Brooks to go out to the portal and say, hi, we like your game. We actually really like the way you play a lot, ma'am. By the way, you're going to back up Clara Strack. It's hard to do. And in this world of NIL, I was talking to somebody the other day. There are some backup centers who are asking for numbers, six-figure range, but high six-figure range, and these are backup centers. And if you're a school like Kentucky, you can't do that. You can't risk putting that much money into a player like that. So, it's going to be interesting how the front court kind of comes together. But I will say, I think that will be a priority for Kenny in the portal, right? if not this next year, definitely after Claire Strack's gone. But I think he's got to look there. But he's just going to look for experience. I did fail to mention Dom Perova will be back as a redshirt sophomore. That'll be massive, right? There's other pieces that'll be back that are obviously slipping my mind right now. But I would say to give you the quick preview, I would say expect that core four, the three freshmen and Kaylin Carroll, to kind of be the ones that this is what the team is going to be built around for the next several years, right? This is a team that I would imagine Kenny's like, I hope it can push for the title with these four, right? And then you have Dom Perova, Asia Boone coming back, senior Claire Strack, which is going to be phenomenal, right? And then it's just about getting supplemental pieces around them. And maybe go get Sarah Okiki, but I don't know. So that's the quick preview of next year's roster. I could see Kentucky taking a bit of a slide because they'll be so young at those core spots. But long term, I feel really, really good about this group. And knowing Kenny and knowing that staff, they're going to recruit like hell to make sure they don't have much of a slide next season, right? Georgia Amore leaves, Kenny's best point guard he's had, right? They didn't look at this season as a slide. They didn't look at this season as, okay, well, let's just try to make it to Madden Greenway, right? They know what they've got. So that's the quick preview. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of the Memorial Memo. I really appreciate it. Again, if you've enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, do all those great things. I appreciate it. Stephen Peak, who is, I believe, already headed down to Gainesville for Kentucky, Florida tomorrow on the men's side. He appreciates it so much as well. Thank you all again for tuning in. Right before we get out of here, do I think it's possible Hassett comes back with the Pavia Aguilar injunction? No. I've asked about that. I was told that is not a possibility. I don't remember why, but I'm pretty sure even with that rule, with the whole JUCO thing, I don't think that applies to Amelia Hassett, so this will be her last year in the blue and white. So, now that we're getting out here, thank you all so much. Let's go 2-0 this weekend, right? Actually, let's go more than 2-0, right? Because baseball is in action. Softball's in action, right? Got a fun times coming for Kentucky athletics, starting hopefully with the win against the Gators and highlighted, of course here, because we're talking about women's basketball, highlighted by the win over the Ole Miss Rebels. I'm Phoenix Stevens. Like I said, thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Until next time, peace out and go Cats. God bless. Thank you all.